The Chiefs instant reaction post-game show is live, and I think I speak for everyone when I ask, what the hell was that? Brendan Dzwierzynski, Dan Lucero here with you live tonight as we recap the Kansas City Chiefs' shocking, disappointing, embarrassing, unbelievable season opening loss to the Detroit Lions, 20 at home on banner night at Arrowhead Stadium. And look, you can count on one hand, maybe, the number of players in this game, Dan, who you can point to and said, no, that guy still played pretty well. Patrick Mahomes, this game was not that for darn sure. He's not someone who is the reason why the Chiefs lost this game. George Karlaftis was awesome in this game. That's a total win. Townsend was pretty good. Felix Anudike-Uzomah, there's another name for you. Felix was really good in his NFL debut. Other than that, mercy me. I mean, we'll get to the drops. We'll get to whatever Jawan Taylor was doing in this game, some of Andy Reid's play calling, but I'm still a little bit in shock. I mean, you heard me on 580 Sports Talk the last couple of days say, I think this is going to be a blowout. This focused, they didn't look like they were concentrating, and credit to Detroit because they played hard. They played gritty. Aside from one bad punt decision, I thought they were well coached throughout the game. I'm just shocked by how poor it felt like the effort was for the Chiefs in this loss.
Let's give Detroit their flowers first. They were the better team in the trenches, I thought, for the better part of 60 minutes. Aiden Hutchinson was a game wrecker. Thought he was terrific. And really made a huge difference. Though Patrick Mahomes wasn't sacked, I don't think he was ever comfortable in the contest. I don't think the Lions front ever really allowed him to get comfortable in the pocket and just sit and have a ton of time. Mahomes had to improvise quite a bit, and that's a credit to the Lions up front. I think it's also a credit to the Lions coming out as one of the teams that played the most man coverage of any team in the NFL last year and playing primarily zone tonight. And I think that change of pace was absolutely a difference maker. And Detroit, their defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, deserve a lot of credit for that. Detroit's offensive line was as advertised. Thought they played pretty well. Chiefs didn't get a ton of pressure rushing, just 3 or 4. Mike Dana did have a sack. You mentioned Felix had a couple of pressures. Karlaftis, I thought, played well, but for the most part, that Detroit front five was the better of the units in tonight's game, and late in the game kind of pushed around the Chiefs as they got worn out a little bit in the fourth quarter. So we give Detroit their credit first. They absolutely deserve it. It doesn't happen often that the home team in the game like this gets beat. We were talking about it on 580 Sports Talk. Typically on these nights, these NFL kickoff games where the home team is the defending Super Bowl champions, usually they win. I think it's only happened 3 times now that the home team, the defending Super Bowl champs, has lost on banner night in the kickoff games that they started doing it. The NFL did in 2004. So that's a credit again to the Lions. They've got a ton of belief, and they've got some good players, and they were the better team in the trenches today. That all being said, it was stunning to see the Chiefs look like this in a season opener because they haven't looked like this on either side of the ball out of sync. Just didn't look like themselves in week 1, and that has been so rare. They were 9-1 in openers under Andy Reid coming into tonight. They hadn't lost an opener under Patrick Mahomes coming into tonight, and tonight they were just out of sync, off kilter, whatever you want to call it. There was bad decision making. There was miscommunication defensively. There was miscommunication offensively. It was a bad effort, and we see this from the Chiefs like every year. Every year, even in the years where they've won championships, we've seen them trick off games they shouldn't lose. Last year was cold.
We've lost Dan momentarily. We'll get him back here in just out. But the point Dan was getting to right there, every year there is a game where the Chiefs, I don't even think they get exposed, although we'll get to that particular word exposed here in just a moment from Kevin in the Facebook comments. But you look at the game against the Colts last year, there was that stretch even in the Super Bowl 54 season where the Chiefs had a couple of games. The one against the Titans really stands out. They played tough, or they had a tough Colts that year. We remember the game that year. So they have these moments, but it is so foreign to see that be the case in week 1 when the Chiefs have been so off of extra long periods to prepare. And we've got Dan hooked back up now. And Dan, I think what you were talking about was just that so rare do we have these appearances from the Chiefs early in seasons and so rare after having extra time to prepare, where they just look so unfocused, so out of sync. And I think that's how I would explain this wide receiver core. I like this group. I think there's a lot of potential. I think there's a lot of God-given talent in this group. But that's Kadarius Tony had one of the worst games I've ever seen a wide receiver play. Sky Moore never got involved. Rashee Rice had the 3 catches and the touchdown. Very cool for him. He was not a huge factor, save for essentially 2 snaps in the game. Justin Ross didn't do a whole lot. The leading receiver for the Chiefs, it's on the trailer right now, had 48 yards in the game. That was Marquez Valdez. Catches. It's just so odd. Again, I sort of teased it at the top. Juwan Taylor with the false start issues. He only got called for, I think, one of them, and it came at a pretty time at the end of the game. But he was false starting on damn near every play. It's just so odd to see this from this team when they've got time to prepare. That's the calling card for Andy Reid, right? You give him a week in the middle of the season for the bye, they're going to kill you right after. Week 1, they're going to smoke you right after. We did a whole segment about this on 580 Sports Talk before the game here on Thursday. It's so foreign to me.
Yeah, to be that unprepared, look that unprepared and be that off kilter in week 1, really, really surprising. That is not the thing. Like, if the Chiefs are going to get beat tonight, I didn't expect it was going to be because of that, and it was 100% because of that. Who do you want to be meaner to over the course of this conversation? Because you mentioned Kadarius Tony. We may as well start there. We'll start with the Jimmies and the Joes.
Man.
I'm speechless.
Has he played football? What we know not the skill in it. Look at what he did in the Super Bowl. Look at what he did in the postseason last year. It looked like this was the first time he had played.
Played organized football.
What was the name a few years ago of that rugby player who played for the 49ers? Do you remember this?
No, I remember. Yeah, he got out there. They were saying great things about him in camp, and then the first football game he played, it fumbled, and that was the end of him.
Yeah, and that was essentially it. Like, that's what he looked like, which is insane. His problem has been injuries. It hasn't been play.
No.
And then he got out there, and like I said, that's one of the worst receiver games I've ever seen.
It might be, when we get down to it, it might end up the worst game by a skill position player that we see all season long across the NFL. I mean, you can't be more harmful to your team's chances of winning than on 3 plays in particular. The drop pass that turns directly into 7 points for the other team. I mean, that pass, say what you want, that's on the money. There's no, well, it's kind of a tough, no, that is on the money. That is in between his hands. That is where a paid National Football League wide receiver catches the football every time. Tony misses that, turns into a pick 6 the other way for Brian Branch. Credit the Lions for capitalizing on the opportunity. That ball has to be caught. And then when you get a chance to go down, you get great field position. You get the big 4th down stop, the first play. You're going to flip the momentum of this game. Like, everybody, I think, watching probably thought, okay, this is where the Chiefs do what they do. Mahomes down the field, couple of completions. They're going to at least get in the field goal range. Butker's going to poke one through. The Chiefs are going to win here because the Chiefs always win here. And then Kadarius Tony, what? Wide open, middle of the field. I guess that one's a little behind him, but still, where's it hit him? In the hands. Worst place to hit you, I guess. You mix all that in with the sweep, the jet sweep they called for him on a 2nd and 1 that short-circuited that drive where the Chiefs were rolling. It looked like they were going to take a 2-score lead, and they end up settling for a field goal, which we'll get to that game theory stuff later. Kadarius Tony, I mean, he old Gellered the Chiefs' chances of winning this game. Took him behind the barn and shot him in the head. And that's going to take a long time, I think, for him to live down. And I think it's going to take a long time for the coaching staff, for the players to really trust Kadarius Tony again. But, I mean, the other question I have is, what would you expect from a guy who played, what do you have, half a week of practice? The guy hadn't practiced, and all of a sudden we hear this week, oh, yeah, he's out there, he's practicing, he's going reps, he's good to go. He didn't look good to go. He looked like he never played the game. So, yeah, it is very rare that you can point to one player in any given NFL game and say that guy's miscues are why the team lost. Usually it's like a kicker, right? They missed 3 field goals. You point the finger at him because they lost by 3 or whatever it is. No, man, Kadarius Tony's got to wear this one, and it's going to take him a while to live that down. He wasn't the only one that no-show tonight. You mentioned leading receiver night was Marquez Valdez-Scantling with 48 yards. Sky Moore completely disappeared in this game. And when he had a couple of chances late, he had the ball knocked out of his hands or bounce off of his hands. That was a showing from the wide receivers. It was an absolute worst case scenario showing. If you were worried about this group of wide receivers, if you were inclined to be concerned and feel like there's not a game breaker in this bunch, there's not a true wide receiver one in this bunch, and maybe this isn't a bunch that Patrick Mahomes can elevate by virtue of just being Patrick Mahomes, you have exhibits A, B, and all the way through the alphabet, I think, in support of your argument with the play of the Chiefs receiving core tonight, Tony especially.
I think for me, you can look at this performance offensively from two perspectives. This positive spin perspective is all of this went wrong. Tony was awful. Moore was a no-show. Nobody did dang near anything in the passing game. The running game was a non-factor from 08. And the Chiefs still had the ball down by just a single point with a chance, had they not completely nuked themselves on that final drive, to go down the field and end up winning that game. They had the time, they had the possession, they could have made that happen. So for all of these disastrous things to happen and still be that close to winning, that's a positive thing, because even a couple things actually go your way and you end up in a more victorious situation. The downside of this, and I think it's interesting, Barbara brought this up in the YouTube comments. The team didn't know that Travis Kelce wasn't going to play until just the other day. There was the expectation that was going to be in there. That changes plans for the players, for the team, etc. And I think that is reasonable to bring up. I would counter with this, though. And even if he's going to play next week, great, awesome. You've got your reliable guy. The other role players can go back to being role players. I understand that. Travis Kelce's 34 years old. I believe it's 34. He's about to turn 34. Like, tight ends at that age who've played so many snaps in their career, who have been workhorses. Mitch Holthus tells us that all the time, that he's like the iron horse of tight ends. He has played so many snaps over time. Guys who are like that, they get beaten up over time. Injuries happen. It's amazing that this is the first time since his rookie year that he's been injured and that he's missed time because of injuries. So what happens if you're in this situation again? What happens if there's something that causes you to not have Kelce for some reason later in the season? You've got to be able to rely on these guys. And it's a long year. You've got 16 games and 17 weeks left. Long break before you take on the Jags next week. Plenty of time to figure some of these things out. But if you end up in a situation where you don't have that number one again, who is going to be able to step up? And I think that's something that was left unanswered today. The next biggest qualm for me, Dan, and you mentioned it a moment ago, what was Andy Reid doing in this game? The one thing that I didn't have beef with was going forward on 4th and 25, because
you had to. You didn't have a choice. Yeah. You left yourself with no choice, because you wouldn't go forward on 4th and 4 and you kick a field goal. You wouldn't go forward on 4th and 2 and you kick a field goal. You wouldn't go forward on 4th and 4 with 5 minutes left. So you have to go forward on 4th and 25. You have no choice, because you shriveled up in those fourth down situations. I didn't mind kicking the field goal to go ahead 17-14, but going ahead 20-14 for me, 4th and 2, you're rolling on that drive. Just go for it. Get a yard. It's 2nd and 1. You run the jet sweep. Oh my God, that jet sweep.
And you had all the momentum too, because the Lions had just completely putzed around on their previous drive. Dan Campbell had first decision of the night when they decided to punt it from the Chiefs' 40-yard line. That was a completely ridiculous move.
Yeah.
And then settling for the field goal essentially let them get away with it. They went from a one-score game to a one-score game. So that, to me, just the game theory stuff is the phrase you used earlier, and I think that's accurate here. We haven't seen this kind of Andy Reid stuff since he was making Juan Castillo his defensive coordinator and I can't believe that we regressed to this point in this specific game. And I get it. It is week 1. I, again, know there is a whole lot of time left. It's just mind-numbing that we got back to this point. And the one that drives me the most insane, that I just cannot get over, and you have heard me complain about this on the air for a couple of years now, about the cutesy play calling, whether it's at the goal line where they failed to run the direct snap to McKinnon. That didn't end up in a touchdown when they tried it the first time in the game. Putting Blake Bell behind center. Andy, the NFL knows exactly what is going to happen if you are snapping the ball to Blake Bell or Noah Gray or Travis Kelce on 4th or 3rd. World. If this idiot knows exactly what is going to happen, you think a good defensive coordinator like Aaron Glenn doesn't know what's going to happen? It just is so frustrating. And You took the ball out of Patrick Mahomes' hand. That's the thing. It's not like you have, to harken back to sports talk today, it's not like you have Spurgeon Wynn under center, dude. You've got the greatest football player on earth. Let him make a play for you.
Get 3 feet with this offensive line that is so highly regarded that you've invested so much in. Get 3 feet. Get Pacheco running hard behind Creed Humphrey, one of the best centers in football. Don't overthink this. They get so cute, and it keeps happening, and you think it's not going to happen. Hey, maybe this is the year they're going to trust it. Maybe this is the year they're going to forget about what happened one freaky, fluky time, and they'll run the quarterback sneak, which in modern NFL, when you're allowed to push the quarterback, that is a cheat code. That is a free first down. And there's only one team, one coach in the NFL that won't take advantage of the free money. And that is Andy Reid, because he's scared that what happened to Patrick Mahomes one time might happen to him again. And look, it was ugly what happened to Patrick Mahomes that night. And I understand wanting to keep your quarterback healthy, but no other team in the NFL has these qualms. It's just you. It's just Andy Reid. It's just the Chiefs failing to take this free money. You take the free money. I mean, we're talking about a 1-point game here. There are so many tipping point moments in this game that if they go the other way, all the other stuff we're complaining about doesn't matter so much. You say, oh, well, yeah, all this stuff happened, but man, they had this drive that they finished off, and they scored the points, they ended up winning the football game, and you take it, you breathe a sigh of relief, and you live and learn. But you trick this one off because every decision it felt like the Chiefs came up with in short yardage was the wrong one. All the game theory stuff they got completely wrong. Not that Dan Campbell got everything right, like you noted, but yeah, the Chiefs got it all wrong. And Andy Reid's never been great at this stuff. I think he's gotten better over the years, but today was a pretty big regression in that department. No question about it.
On the, bright side, if there is a bright side, one, and Thomas brings this up in the YouTube comments, we did have an offside on or a false start on everyone but the center call. That was very fun. Always love when we get
those. Are always good, yes.
Right there with getting a disconcerting signals call for my favorite calls from officials. So that was kind of fun. Defensively, and I know we've got some folks in the YouTube comments who are upset about the Jones situation, and I will be honest with you, Chris Jones in a suite sitting between the Katz brothers watching this game feels weird. Like, I don't know if icky is the right word or uncomfortable. It's odd. It's definitely odd.
It was super odd, but I mean, look, I'm not here to tell anybody how to feel or what to feel, but the absence of Chris Jones is not why the Kansas City Chiefs lost this game. I mean, the
defense was pretty good. The defense itself only allowed 14 points.
3.5 yards per rush to that vaunted Lions offensive rushing game, their multifaceted rushing game, and their great offensive line. And this Chiefs team without Chris Jones held them to 3.5 yards per carry. That's pretty good. Yeah, they were missing some pass rush presence without Chris Jones. Of course they were. Just like the offense was missing a presence without Travis Kelce. But I don't think you can say Chris Jones is the reason why the Chiefs lost this game, or they would have won it with Chris Jones. I don't think you can definitively say that. I think you can say a lot about the guys who were on the field and didn't perform, but I don't think you can say, I see a lot of it on social media. I've seen some of it in the comments. Wow, now Chris Jones, they should just give him whatever he wants. Well, no, I don't think we saw tonight that the Chiefs defense is the culprit here. I thought they played a pretty good. They came up with the stop they needed. We have seen this Chiefs game dozens of times in the Mahomes Reid era where they futz around a little bit and they're playing with their food and they're down late, but their defense comes up with a stop and Mahomes gets the ball and they need a score and there's 2.5 minutes left and everybody in the world knows they're going to get it. And then they go and get it and they win. Like, they've won so many games like this, right? So many close games exactly like this. And they were on target to do it again. If Kadarius Tony hangs on to the freaking football, they do it. Like, there's no doubt in my mind if Tony catches that pass, barring a fumble or something weird, the Chiefs are going to win that football game. So, you can do all the finger pointing you want, but at the end of the day, it's about the guys on the field. And, they weren't good enough tonight, and one in particular wasn't really good enough. And I see on Twitter there's a graph here. It's about expected points added per target.
This.
Yes, expected points added is one of those advanced metrics. And Kadarius Tony on his targets tonight, his expected points added was -2.19. To put it the other way, if you threw to Kadarius Tony 3 times in tonight's game, that would be the equivalent of the other team scoring a touchdown. And it was a 1-point Chiefs loss.
It's so frustrating. I do want to add, while we are talking the defensive side of the ball, I do want to give props to a couple of guys on the defensive line. One, I mean, you don't talk about a lot of positive things after a loss like this. That's so. Laftis was awesome. He was great in this game. I thought you could probably make an argument he was the Chiefs' best player in this game. And a guy you have been about a lot during training camp, during the preseason leading into this, who someone needs to step up on the line and make plays while Chris Jones is out. Mike Dana was that dude in this game, especially in the first half. He flashed a couple of times. Collinsworth brought him up and said, hey, look, he's not maybe the best athlete in the world, kind of a forgotten man, but they keep him around and playing well. Thought he did a good job when the Chiefs went to that NASCAR package like I was hoping they would show a little bit. The secondary was okay. I thought there were some space issues, kind of the same thing we saw in that Saints preseason game. It just felt like there was a lot of open space on a lot of those play action dropbacks. But other than that, I thought the defense was fine. Nick Bolton got flagged for pushing, I guess, and also blew up David Montgomery. That was one of the better highlights of the game.
Yeah,
overall,
played a good game. I thought, obviously Trent McDuffie forced the turnover. Thought he had some moments. When the Lions were able to have winning plays, it was a lot of deep middle zone stuff against play action, and those plays are designed to win when you have a running game the other team has to respect. And a lot of those are scheme victories for the Lions. So you have to give them credit for their scheme and for getting those guys open in that level of the defense. The safety play was really poor early. Justin Reid played better in the second half. Mike Edwards just out there getting some cardio in. I don't know what he brought to the table tonight. Wasn't really impressed by number 21 in red. We mentioned Karlaftis. We mentioned Felix. Let's talk about Jawan Taylor for a second, because he was one of the most talked about players of the night, because it was honestly hysterical that the one time they flag him for false start after all of America begging for him to be called for a false start was on 4th down and 20. That's a great bit. The comedy gods, I can't do anything but respect that. But he's timing the kick step right. It's not a penalty. The kick step is not a penalty. I'm telling you, it is not a penalty. I know Terry McCauley said he's not lined up properly. He needs to be lined up closer to the line of scrimmage. Well, that's on the refs. If the refs aren't spotting it, what are you going to do? The kick step is not in and of itself a penalty. If they time it right, and those guys generally do time it really well, then they don't get called. The time it was a false start, he didn't time it well, and they threw the flag. So that was, to me, pretty funny. Taylor had his hands full. I thought Smith had the killer holding penalty there on that last drive. So I thought it was a decent day for the tackles with a tough matchup in Hutchinson up until that last drive. I think what we're going to take away from this game, though, in the end, is it was mismanaged by Andy Reid. It was a Chiefs team that looked a little unprepared, or by their standards, certainly by their Week 1 season opener standards. And Kadarius Tony, had he been shaving points, I'm not sure how he would have played any differently than he did tonight.
And like you said at the top, credit to the Lions because they played their hearts out. I thought Campbell, for the most part, called a good game. I thought Ben Johnson called a pretty good game for the most part. Even when Goff was a little shaky in the middle parts of the game, they did a good job to do enough offensively. The pick 6 off of Tony's hands helped. Frustrating game, to say the least. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us during our instant reaction post-game show. Of course, we will be getting to all of this and so much more coming up on the Friday edition of 580 Sports Talk. We'll break down every part of this game with our Chiefs insider, Matt Derrick from ChiefsDigest.com. Know he's going to have some interesting thoughts about how this unfolded. We'll take your texts. Text line number is 785-272-9429. Save that. We're on live tomorrow at 2 o'clock, Friday live from 2 until 6. So go text us your thoughts on the game. And of course, the YouTube feed where you might be watching right now. If you're watching on Facebook, watching on Twitter, make sure you go check us out on YouTube at 580 Sports Talk is where you can go find us there. And we'll be back streaming live and of course on 580 AM coming up on Friday afternoon from 2 until 6. For Dan Lucero, I'm Brendan Dzwierzynski. This has been the Chiefs Instant Reaction post-game show. We will talk to you guys on 580 Sports Talk coming up Friday.